All right, everyone get ready because today we are going deep, deep down into earthquakes.
Ooh, sounds shaky.
You sent us some awesome bits from earthquake, the forces that shape our planet, so
Yeah. Let's
we're going to really get into it.
let's break it down.
And it's clear you're super interested in all this powerful stuff happening. I mean,
It's fascinating.
who isn't? It makes you
Mm.
think like, wow, the ground under us is always
Right,
moving.
always moving, yeah.
But get this. Did you know we get earthquakes on the moon, too?
It's true, yeah. So we think of the moon, right? And it's this silent, quiet place, nothing's
Yeah,
happening.
right.
But it actually has these tremors, like little shakes.
Hmm.
They're not as big or as often as earthquakes, and the reason they happen is a bit different. See, our earthquakes are mainly from those tectonic plates.
Right, yeah.
But moonquakes, we think it's a bunch of things together causing them, like
Hmm.
the Earth's gravity pulling on the moon and the moon's insides slowly cooling down and shrinking.
So it's like the moon is kind of like getting older and that
Yeah.
makes it shake.
Yeah, in a way, you can think of it like that. But before we go all the way to the moon,
Yeah, let's come back to Earth.
let's make sure we get the basics down here first, right under our feet. You've probably heard of epicenter, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But have you thought about the hypocenter?
Hmm. I admit, I usually just think about that spot on top where it shakes the most.
That's the epicenter. But the hypocenter, or sometimes called the focus, that's the real starting point underground where the earthquake actually begins.
Ah, okay.
So imagine like a target, the bullseye is down below, that's the hypocenter, and straight above it on the surface, that's your epicenter.
Okay, I get it. Yeah, that makes more sense.
Good. And we measure all that earthquake energy with the moment magnitude scale, right? That's the one that replaced the old Richter scale.
That's the one, yeah, the modern one.
Exactly. And it's way more accurate, especially for the really big quakes,
Mm.
because it looks at how much of the fault line broke, how far the ground moved there,
Mm.
and how hard the rocks are in that spot.
Wow, okay, so it's a lot more detailed than just like how much it shakes on the surface.
Exactly. It gets the whole picture of how much power was released.
So, vocab lesson done.
Huh. Yeah.
Now, the big question, why does the Earth shake like that? It's all about those tectonic plates, am I right?
Got it. So Earth's got this outer shell, the lithosphere, and it's broken up into these huge GE pieces, the tectonic plates.
Okay.
And they're always moving very slowly on top of this gooey layer called the asthenosphere. And all that movement creates crazy forces. That's what makes earthquakes happen.
So like a puzzle, but the pieces are always bumping and grinding around?
That's the perfect way to think about it.
Yeah.
And most of the action, the quakes, they happen at the edges where these pieces meet. So we've got three types. Convergent boundaries where they smash
A
together.
crash.
Yeah. Then divergent boundaries where they pull apart. And transform boundaries where they slide past each other sideways.
Like a slow motion sideswipe?
Exactly. And each type of meeting creates different stresses, different ways the ground gets pushed, and that's what can cause the shaking to start.
The article mentioned the San Andreas Fault. That's a famous example of, was it the transform one?
Yes. San Andreas, that's where the Pacific plate and the North American plate are, like doing this slow dance past each other.
A dance that can cause a lot of damage.
Right. All that rubbing builds up tension, and bang! That tension releases, and you get a quake.
Wow, it really is like the Earth's way of letting off steam.
Haha, that's one way to put it. But it's not just the plates bumping and grinding. Volcanoes can cause earthquakes too.
Right, because all that magma.
Yeah, the magma pushing up through the Earth's crust, that can trigger quakes as well.
So volcanoes are adding to the earthquake drama.
They sure are. And you know what's even crazier? Humans can cause earthquakes too.
Wait, what?
Yeah, it's not as common, but things like mining or building huge dams that make giant lakes, even fracking, all that can change the pressures underground, and sometimes that can set off a quake.
Wow, so we're not just watching this happen, we're sometimes a part of it too.
Yeah, it makes you think, huh? It's a reminder that what we do can affect the Earth's balance, even deep down.
That's a good point. So we've got what earthquakes are and why they happen. Now, how about the how? How does all that energy from deep down travel to the surface and make the ground shake so much?
Ah, that's where seismic waves come in. Imagine you drop a pebble into a still pond, right?
I see those ripples spreading out.
Exactly. It's kind of like that with an earthquake. That energy travels out from the hypocenter in waves called seismic waves.
So Earth's the pond
Uh-huh.
and the earthquake's the pebble.
You got it. Now, there are a few different kinds of these waves. Each one moves in a different way. First up, the P waves, the primary waves.
Okay.
They're the speed demons, zipping through the Earth's insides, squeezing and stretching the rock as they go.
So they're like the earthquake's announcement. Hey, get ready, something's coming.
Yeah, you can think of it like that. Then you got the S waves, the secondary waves. They're a bit slower, and they shake the ground side to side, perpendicular to the direction they're traveling.
Like those wave pools at water parks, the ones that knock you over.
Yeah, good visual.
Eh.
And lastly, the grand finale, the surface waves. They're the slowest, but they can cause the most damage because they travel right along the Earth's surface, and their motion is all twisty and turny.
So P waves are the messengers, S waves are the tough guys, and then surface waves are the ones that really mess things up.
You got it. They're responsible for most of the shaking and damage we see from earthquakes.
Wow, so these waves are literally rippling out from that underground starting point, the hypocenter. It makes you think about the aftermath. Earthquakes can have devastating consequences, right?
Absolutely, yeah. You're talking about loss of life, people getting hurt, buildings and everything getting destroyed.
Hmm.
It's a huge human impact, really heartbreaking. And then there's the cost of putting everything back together. It can be billions of dollars. It's unbelievable.
It's hard to even imagine that much destruction. And it's not just us humans who are affected, right? The environment takes a hit too.
For sure. Earthquakes can trigger landslides and avalanches, especially in the mountains. And if it happens under the ocean, you get that huge amount of water displaced. That's how tsunamis form.
Tsunamis are terrifying, a giant wall of water just sweeping in.
It's a force of nature. And then you have what we call ground ruptures, where the Earth's surface actually cracks open and shifts, changing the landscape completely.
Wow, so it's really a domino effect.
Yeah, it really shows you how connected everything is and how powerful these forces are.
Definitely makes you think. So we can't stop earthquakes, but can we at least have a heads up? Is there any way to predict when and where the next big one will hit?
That's the million-dollar question. And sadly, there's no easy answer. Predicting earthquakes exactly is still a huge challenge for scientists.
I can imagine.
We've gotten a lot better at tracking and measuring them, which helps us understand the dangers and be more prepared.
So what kind of tools are we using to keep an eye on all this seismic activity? You mentioned seismographs earlier.
Yes, seismographs are key. They're like our ears to the ground, listening to all those vibrations, those seismic waves we talked about. By looking at the data from a bunch of seismographs, scientists can pinpoint where the earthquake happened and how strong it was.
It's like we're trying to understand what the Earth is saying, listening for clues from deep down.
Exactly. And that data helps us fine-tune those magnitude scales, like that moment magnitude scale, to really get a precise reading of the energy released.
And what about those early warning systems? I've heard about those. Are they becoming more common?
Yeah, thankfully they are, and they're getting more advanced all the time. They use sensors to pick up those first P waves, remember those fast ones? And by catching those, the system can send out alerts, even if it's just seconds or minutes before the bigger, more damaging waves hit.
Wow, even a few seconds could be huge, right? Enough time to take cover or maybe even shut down dangerous systems automatically.
Exactly. Those seconds can save lives and reduce damage. It's pretty amazing how we're using technology to improve our chances against these natural hazards.
It really shows how far we've come. So we can't stop them from happening, but at least we're getting better at understanding, tracking, and even getting a little bit of warning about them.
That's what's important. We can't control the Earth, but we can control how we prepare and react. And that's where preparedness and mitigation come in. Those are our best weapons against the destructive power of earthquakes.
Let's get into that then. What are some things we can do to lessen the impact of these events? You mentioned something about earthquake-resistant buildings earlier.
Yes. Designing buildings that can actually withstand the force of an earthquake is super important. It means using strong materials like reinforced concrete and steel frames, putting in things called base isolators to absorb the shocks, and making the buildings flexible enough to move with the shaking instead of just snapping.
So it's not just about strength, it's about being smart with the design, right? Kind of like a tree that bends with the wind.
Exactly. Nature gives us great ideas, but beyond the building itself, planning for emergencies is crucial. Teaching people what to do during an earthquake, like the drop, cover, and hold on technique, that can save lives.
It's got to be like second nature, so when it happens, you know what to do without even thinking.
You got it.
Hmm.
And practicing with drills helps a lot too. Plus, having an emergency kit ready with water, food, first aid, all the essentials, that's super important.
Always be prepared, right? Because even with the best planning, there's always going to be some chaos.
That's the truth. And then there's land use planning, which is a fancy way of saying we got to be smart about where we build stuff. Avoid those high-risk zones, like those right on top of fault lines or places where the ground can turn to liquid during a quake. It's crazy.
Wow, okay.
There's a whole team effort, right? Building codes, emergency plans, land use planning. all working together to create a community that can bounce back.
It's about working with the Earth, not against it, right?
Exactly. It's not just about surviving an earthquake. It's about thriving afterwards.
I like that. Thriving. But before we go too far, let's back up a bit. You mentioned it's hard to predict earthquakes, and I was reading about these earthquake swarms. And I gotta admit, I'm a little confused. What's going on there? It's like the Earth is having a seismic hiccup or something?
Earthquake swarms are wild. They're like bursts of earthquakes happening over a few days, weeks, even months, but there's no one big main earthquake.
So instead of one massive one, it's a bunch of smaller ones.
You got it. Now, scientists are still figuring out what exactly causes them, but they often happen in places with complex fault systems, like a bunch of cracks, or around volcanoes. One idea is that it's fluids moving deep underground, like water or magma.
So the Earth's letting off steam, but instead of one big explosion, it's a bunch of smaller ones.
Uh-huh, perfect analogy. But these swarms are tricky because we don't know if they mean a bigger earthquake is coming or if it's just the Earth's way of slowly releasing stress.
It's like trying to read the Earth's mind, huh? Looking for patterns.
Exactly. And it shows how complex our planet is and how much we still don't know about predicting these powerful events.
Okay, so while we're talking about mind-blowing events, before we finish up this part of our deep dive, let's go back to those moonquakes. It's still amazing to me that the moon, this quiet ball in space, is having its own little earthquakes.
It's wild, right? It reminds us that nothing is truly still, even out in space. Now, remember how earthquakes are mostly from those moving plates? Well, the moon doesn't have those.
So if it's not plates, what makes the moon shake?
We think it's mainly the Earth's gravity. As the moon goes around us, our gravity pulls and stretches its insides.
So it's like Earth is giving the moon a cosmic massage.
Haha, you could say that. And all that pulling and squeezing builds up stress in the moon's crust, and eventually, boom, moonquake.
That's incredible. Even in space, gravity is shaping things.
It really shows you how connected everything in the universe is, even things that seem super far apart.
That's amazing. All right, so we've covered a ton, from the science behind earthquakes to the crazy idea of moonquakes. But before we move on, what do you think is the biggest takeaway so far?
For me, it's realizing that even though earthquakes are powerful and scary, we're not helpless.
Hmm.
By understanding the science, being prepared, and building things the right way, we can make a huge difference in how safe we are.
Yeah, totally agree. It's about being smart, not scared, right? We got to understand what's going on and be ready.
Exactly, being proactive. And speaking of being prepared, I was thinking about how much better we've gotten at building earthquake-proof stuff.
Oh, yeah. It's amazing how they make those buildings that can withstand so much.
It's incredible how they design those structures to be so strong. But, with the Earth always doing its thing, are we keeping up? Especially in those cities with tons of people.
That's a good point. It's a lot to handle.
It's a big challenge for sure, especially with so many people living in earthquake zones. And it's not just new buildings. We got to think about the old ones too.
Oh, right. Making those older buildings safer.
Retrofitting them. Yeah, it's a huge job. Any particular tech or methods you find interesting in that race against time?
That's a good question. I was reading about,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, those base isolation systems. That sounds pretty
Oh,
cool.
those are fascinating. They're like putting the building on these giant shock absorbers. It basically disconnects the building from the ground so it can move more smoothly during a quake.
So it's like a ship on the ocean. It rides the waves instead of getting smashed by them.
Exactly. That's a great way to think about it. And then there were these fancy damping systems that use special materials to absorb the energy of the earthquake so the building shakes less.
It's like giving the building its own personal stress ball. Ha ha.
That's a great analogy. And we're also getting better with material science. We're using these high-tech concrete and steel that are way stronger and more flexible so buildings can bend without breaking under pressure.
So it's not just about making them unbreakable. It's about letting them move with the flow.
Exactly. It's all about flexibility and resilience. And, it's not just the buildings themselves. We got to think about all the stuff that connects them too. Roads, bridges, pipelines, communication networks, all that needs to be earthquake-proof too.
Right. It's about creating a system that can handle anything.
It's about creating a web of resilience, exactly. Speaking of, you mentioned earlier that some parts of the world are more prone to earthquakes than others. The Ring of Fire, that's a big one.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that. Isn't that around the Pacific Ocean?
You got it. That's where a huge number of earthquakes happen. It's a zone where a bunch of tectonic plates are pushing and pulling on each other. And a lot of big cities like Tokyo, Jakarta, Los Angeles, they're all right there on the Ring of Fire.
Wow. So millions of people are living with that constant threat.
It's a reality for a lot of people. What can we do globally to improve earthquake resilience, especially in those vulnerable areas?
That's a big question. What do you think?
Well, I think sharing knowledge and working together is crucial. We got to pool our resources, share what we've learned about engineering and preparedness, and help each other build those early warning systems and response plans.
It's about realizing that we're all connected, right? A big earthquake on one side of the world can affect everyone.
Absolutely. And education is key too. We need to teach communities about the risks, how to prepare, and why those building codes are so important. It's about building a culture of preparedness.
It's about taking control, not just waiting for something bad to happen.
Exactly. And, that brings us back to something we touched on earlier, the psychological impact of earthquakes.
Hmm.
It's not just about the physical damage, it's about the emotional trauma too.
Right, the fear, the anxiety, losing everything, that's a whole other level of impact.
It's a huge part of it. We need to make sure people have support systems, access to mental health care, counseling, community programs. All of that is crucial for recovery.
So it's not just about rebuilding houses and bridges, it's about rebuilding lives and communities, right?
Yeah, exactly. And building resilience, that inner strength to bounce back and overcome these challenges.
Right.
We can learn from people who've been through these disasters. Their stories of recovery are incredibly inspiring.
I read about communities that actually use the experience of an earthquake as a way to create positive change.
Really?
Yeah, they come together not just to rebuild what was lost, but to build something even better, more resilient, more sustainable. They rethink their cities and communities.
That's amazing. It shows that even in the face of destruction, there's an opportunity for growth and innovation.
It's really incredible how resilient humans can be. We don't just survive, we find ways to thrive.
I completely agree. It goes back to that sense of awe and wonder we talked about earlier. Earthquakes are powerful, sure, but they also remind us how dynamic our planet is. It's a testament to the constant change and evolution that's been happening for billions of years.
It's like the Earth is alive, and earthquakes are just one way it expresses itself.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And as we learn to understand those expressions, to listen to the Earth, we gain a deeper appreciation for its complexity and beauty.
And that deeper understanding can connect us not just to the planet, but to each other. We're all in this together, we share this Earth, and we need to take care of it and each other.
Absolutely. One thing that always fascinates me about studying earthquakes is how it leads to unexpected discoveries in other areas of science.
Like what?
Well, for example, did you know that the Earth's magnetic field, the one that protects us from all that harmful radiation from the sun, is actually created by the movement of molten iron in the Earth's core?
Wow, I didn't know that. It's amazing how everything is connected.
Right, the tectonic plates moving, the magnetic field, those slow earthquakes, it's all part of this incredible complex system that makes up our planet.
It really is. And it makes you realize how much we still don't know about how Earth works. There's so much more to discover.
It's an ongoing journey of discovery. And speaking of exploration, before we move on to the last part of our deep dive, I wanted to share another interesting tidbit from the material.
Oh, yeah. What's that?
It's this idea that earthquakes might actually play a role in how life evolved on Earth.
That's intriguing.
Right. Some scientists believe that all the changes earthquakes cause, like creating new land or changing ocean currents, could have pushed life to adapt and evolve.
Like the Earth is constantly mixing things up, creating new chances for life to change and grow.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder, what role will earthquakes play in the future of life on Earth? How will they keep shaping our planet and all the creatures on it?
That's a really good question. And it's something to think about as we head into the final part of our exploration. We've covered so much: the science behind earthquakes, those mind-blowing moonquakes, the importance of being prepared, and those subtle, slow earthquakes.
It's been an incredible journey so far.
It really has. But before we wrap up this part, what's the one thing you hope our listener takes away from this deep dive into earthquakes? What's the most important message?
I think the most important thing to remember is that even though earthquakes are a powerful force of nature, knowledge and preparedness are our best weapons. We can't stop them, but we can learn to live with them safely and build a more resilient world.
It's about taking what we know, taking action, and creating a future where we can not only survive these challenges, but actually thrive in the face of them.
I love that, thrive. It's about turning a potential disaster into an opportunity for growth and progress.
It really is amazing, right? We've talked about science, the risks, how to prepare, even how earthquakes might have shaped life on Earth. I feel like we've gone deep really explored this whole earthquake thing.
It's been a wild ride for sure. Something we haven't talked much about is how earthquakes affect people, like mentally and emotionally.
Oh, right, the trauma, the fear, it's not just about buildings falling down.
Exactly. That's a huge part of it. And we got to make sure people have the support they need. Mental health services, counseling, community programs, all that's super important for recovery.
So rebuilding isn't just about bricks and mortar, it's about helping people heal too.
Exactly. It's about fostering resilience, that belief that we can overcome this and come out stronger. We can learn a lot from people who've already gone through it. Their stories are so inspiring.
Yeah, I read about communities that actually use the experience of an earthquake to make positive changes.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, they don't just rebuild what was lost, they build it back better, stronger, greener. They reimagine their whole community.
That's so powerful. It shows that even after something terrible, there's a chance to grow and make things better.
Humans are pretty amazing, huh? We don't just survive, we find a way to thrive.
I couldn't agree more. It reminds me of what we're saying about the Earth's power and beauty. Earthquakes are scary, but they also show us how dynamic our planet is. It's a reminder that it's always changing and evolving.
It's like the Earth has a heartbeat, and earthquakes are just one of its rhythms.
I love that analogy.
Mm.
And the more we understand those rhythms, the more we appreciate the complexity and wonder of our planet.
And that understanding can connect us, not just to the Earth, but to each other, too. We're all sharing this planet, we gotta take care of it and each other.
Absolutely. One of the coolest things about studying earthquakes is how it often leads to discoveries in other areas of science, things you wouldn't expect.
Oh, like what? Give me an example.
Okay, so did you know that the Earth's magnetic field, the one that protects us from harmful radiation from the sun, is created by molten iron moving around in the Earth's core?
Wow, no way. I never knew that. It's amazing how it all ties together.
Isn't it? It's like this giant puzzle, the tectonic plates, the magnetic field, even those slow earthquakes we talked about. It's all part of this incredible system that keeps our planet going.
It really makes you realize how much we still have to learn about how the Earth works.
There's always something new to discover. Before we finish up our deep dive, there's one more thing I wanted to share, something really interesting from the material we looked at.
Oh, I'm all ears. What is it?
It's this idea that earthquakes might have actually played a part in how life evolved on Earth. What do you think about that?
Hmm, that's a new one. I've never thought about that before.
Right. Some scientists think that all the changes caused by earthquakes, like new land forming or ocean currents shifting, could push life to adapt and change over millions of years.
So like earthquakes were shaking things up, literally, and that led to new kinds of life.
Exactly. It makes you wonder, what role will earthquakes play in the future of life? How will they keep shaping our planet and everything on it?
It's a question to ponder, for sure. Wow, we've covered a lot today. The science of earthquakes, those moonquakes, how to be prepared, and even the possibility that they helped shape life itself. It's been an amazing journey.
It really has. So to our listener, thanks for coming along with us on this deep dive. We hope you learned some cool stuff, gained a new appreciation for our amazing planet, and maybe even got inspired to keep learning about earthquakes on your own.
Couldn't have said it better myself. We've learned that knowledge is power, and when it comes to earthquakes, that power can save lives. So stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe. Until next time.